Hey everybody, I just wanted to touch base with you all quickly to talk about your assignment, the Rorschach evaluation test based on the movie, The Dark Mirror. I'm really impressed with your analysis of the short clip. I don't know if anybody actually went through and watched the full movie on YouTube. Of course, it's out there for you to watch if you found it at all interesting. Any of those old psychological thrillers. Maybe did, maybe find time to go back later and watch it if you so choose, to give you a fuller contextual view of the movie. And of course, that 5-minute clip can't give you the full thing, and that might even change your views on some of it. Nevertheless, I wanted to kind of go in through down the questions and kind of give you some my perspective on it and pull some literature that I found as I was looking through the great net and get some analysis on that. So I'll kind of just talk through a few of the questions. Now, keep in mind, this movie was created in the 1940s. So we're already talking about a time period that obviously placed women in a small box. So we know that they're very delimited as far as power goes. So that's important. And in some of the verbiage that's used and how they were viewed in terms of their counterparts, men. So, obviously men played more powerful roles. So those are things when you're looking to do analyses. I also urge you as students to always think outside the box. Never be afraid to ask questions. Although the questions on your assignments may, you know, prompt you to go this way, if you think of something a little different that says, well, you may ask me, what is your thoughts on XYZ? And maybe your thought is a little different. Don't be afraid to push the envelope if you think a little bit beyond the scope of what that question is, because that just means you as a student are emerging as a scholar a bit more, which is fantastic. That is what I expect of you, and that we as your instructors expect of you. So, keep doing those things. So I'll just kind of run down the questions, and just kind of talk about how I thought of those. If you answer them thoroughly, it's not like, yes, that's the right answer, or no, that's the wrong answer, because when dealing with these type of things, they are quite subjective to the person, right? So for me, when I was thinking about how Dr. Elliott assessed it, if you didn't, know the full scope of the movie, the plot of the movie, some people thought, and it was kind of split. Some people were like, oh, there's no real difference on how he assessed each twin. And some people were like, yeah, they've seen slight differences. And maybe contextually, he didn't assess them different. Yeah, they each got ink blots, right? But maybe the layout, the dialogue, the energy was different. And I got that a little bit just from the layout, right? So he was warmer, right, to one than he was to the other. And at least that's how I picked up on it when I was watching it. Like, so right off the gate, like, turn, he had him turn Lord, I'm already mixing the characters up. Let me pull my notes back up over here. Let's see here. Well, I'm doing that though. So when he had what was it, Terry is the one that was the who was the insane one, quote unquote insane one. This guy's second time. So he had Terry turn her back to him while he was very like cut, he did not like, smooth into the conversation. He was like very straightforward with the ink blots and like, just give me your view of what these images are. Whereas with Ruth, he was very warm and it seemed like he was having, a dialogue with her. So those types of energies in the room could kind of shape the responses that those clients are giving. If you are the therapist or the clinician or even a friend giving advice or listening to the advice of someone else, depending on the energy that you give back to another person, that could shape how they respond to you. So for me, yes, I do think that there's a little bit of shift in how they were assessed, although those tools, the measures were the same. Um, so with that said, too, do you think that the way that Terry and Ruth were assessed influenced the responses? Yes, I do think that, again, we know that this is a movie, this is Hollywood, and this is the 40s. If this was in real life, though, I do think that there would be some influence on their responses based on the way Dr. Was it Lyles? Was that his name in the movie? Based on the way that the psychologist lies, maybe Lou Ayers or Ayers, based on the way that he Dr. Scott Elliott. Lou Ayers is the character's actual real name. Dr. Elliott, the way that he actually, reacted to them. So if I had to pick, which twin gave the more adaptive versus healthy response? Well, naturally, we would say that we would think based on the characters as they were written, that if Terry is indeed a cold, calculating psychopath and an insane murderer, like the plot of the movie tells us, or if you watched it, then you would know that she was the one that was, the murderer at the end, then maybe her responses were considered more adaptive, right? She was given answers that we wanted to hear or that the doctor wanted to hear. Whereas Ruth was giving us the bread and butter responses. Oh, this is just a regular cloud, or this is just some, fun reasoning. The answers didn't seem as dark, for lack of better words, whereas Terry's answers were darker than Ruth's answers. And again, that can't be all just based on one scenario, obviously, because nothing happens in a vacuum. And if we listen to a little bit of that background, we know that the girls did not grow up together. So perhaps some of Terry's environment, or that when we talk about nature versus nurture, some of that gene environment interaction wasn't always working best in Terry's favor, because some of that environment might have not have been the best for her, or there was some biological things going on in Terry that wasn't going on in Ruth. So always consider that impact. And of course, we'll talk more about gene environment interaction or nature versus nurture later on. Well, part two, you had a few more questions. What do you think of the diagnosis that Dr. Elliott gave Terry? So, based on that clip, or if you were to read through a little bit of the Wikipedia entry, basically, mid-century Hollywood, the 40s, essentially says, she was insane. And, this could have been the fact that whenever he was hired to do this, they already suspected that she was the murderer. So they went in and they were possibly priming her to get these responses so that they could probably pin this murder on her. Even if she did do it, maybe there were some ways that we know when law enforcement's working with, clinicians or whomever to try to get that response. Now, whether the diagnosis of insanity, which we know it's not labeled like that now in the DSM, however, if I don't have access to a DSM older time DSM, but however, at that time, that might have been the accurate label or categorization based on the behaviors that were elicited by Terry. We might not think that that's accurate now. However, that may have been accurate based on the time, in history. And our thoughts about projective tests. Do we find that Dr. Elliott's use of the ink blot test are valid and reliable? Again, if we are thinking about the way they were presented to them, that question is up in the air, right? So we know they were possibly presented to them, contextually different. Although the content was the same, the tests were the same, they were just presented slightly different with different energy, warmly versus, more coldly and things like that. But the tests themselves, yes, they have been found to be valid and reliable. So I found some information based on published reports that Rorschach can be regarded as reliable and valid as a psychometric instrument. given that certain conditions are met. Now, one is that it is administered by an experienced, competent examiner. They have to be highly trained in by using those. Another condition is that a known and structured method of assessment be used. Of the structured method, there are more than one option. The most widely recognized system is the comprehensive system, and that's described by Exner in research back in 1993. The final condition is that it be applied with a suitable population and with an appropriate purpose of diagnosis or assessment for which validity has been demonstrated. Um, we know that this has always been one of those types of tests that has a lot of, um, subjective nature to it, as well as it's always been very, very controversial. Has it been used accurately? Are we putting the right characters on people when it's being used? Um, so whether it's used accurately and reported um, appropriately, there again depends on which research you pull. That's very much going to depend on pretty much who you ask. Like, it depends on who you ask. But almost nearly 100 years later, it is still being used by certain researchers, certain clinicians. Um, and then as far as the last question goes, are there other types of objective tests that might be better, objective versus projective tests as far as putting your own view? So again, we're talking about tests that are subjective to the person. And if I'm saying, this is my interpretation of who you are based on what you say based on this particular item, again, we're talking about that's subjective to the person. And of course, anybody can tell you what they think, right? I can show you all this image right here, right? And 75% of the class can say, oh, that's cheetah prints, and nothing more, right? And then the rest of the class can be like, no, that's some stripes. And then I could be like, oh, well, then y'all are insane. But that would be, unfair unless I was in that small percentage, right? It's like, oh, yeah, that's stripes. And then how would it go for us trying to then me be in a position of authority and tell the people that said that this is cheetah prints that they're all insane. So people in positions of power and authority um, can also shift views. And we talk about that a lot in research ethics and those types of things. So as far as other types of projective tests or any other types of tests in general, we know that there's other types of those tests, such as the thematic appreciation test, which is a TAT. Some others can be like free associations, right? Like if I say carrot, you say like the next first thing that comes to mind, or even things like dream analysis, right? Like, so is anybody into like Freud and talking about those things, which if you ever have crazy dreams and like your mama and your grandma and your aunties and then be like, oh, that means such and such, or uh man, everyone loves the one where you're like, oh, such and such dreamed about fish. And like, oh my God, someone's pregnant. I'm from the South. We were a country. So anytime someone dreamed about fish, somebody was about to be pregnant. um, but of course, there are more objective tests that we use today, personality type tests, the ocean test and the MMPI and all those types of tests. So I just want to give you a few minutes as I chatted with you all to let you know I was really impressed with your feedback. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, and I look forward to seeing your development of your personality fact sheet. Have a great rest of your week, and reach out to me if you need me.